I think AI is a challenge. I think it's a challenge in a couple of different ways.
All right, welcome back everyone to another episode of the Brainiac Blueprint, where I'm joined by our esteemed guest to discuss the intersection of AI and how it impacts real-world business today. I am your host, Kyle Lambert, founder of Left Brain AI and Action Hero Marketing. Today's episode is going to be very sales-focused, as we have a lifelong sales leader joining us today. With that being said, today's Brainiac is Rob Beattie. Welcome to the show, Rob.
Kyle, thanks. It's really great to be here this morning.
Yeah, I appreciate this. You taking some time and some flexibility with the scheduling here. So, like I mentioned, I know you're a sales guy. You have a lot of experience. So tell us a little bit about what you've been doing in your career, what your resume looks like. And I know, again, we've talked, you have a little bit of a change going on right now.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that resume is long. It's been, it's one of those things where I'm like, I could take you through a lot of stuff, but suffice it to say, I've been in sales leadership for over 20 years, and it's been an interesting journey. I always say my first professional sales job. My first job was delivering the internet door to door, which is I had a paper route when I was a kid. But
Nice.
My first real sales job, I went in and they were arguing whether or not salespeople should be given email. Like, would that even be something that people would communicate with? And so from that to where we are today, where, tools, GPT style tools help craft and create messaging and help people become more efficient. It's just been fascinating to see that journey. But anyway, I was with a company called Thomson Reuters for 15 years. And then I went to a medical software company called ModMed just almost 5 years ago. Recently transitioned from ModMed. And so I'm on a journey at this point in my career of just trying to figure out, hey, what do I want to do? I've been chasing that number for so long. And as I shared with you, the funniest thing for me was like on day 2 of this sabbatical, I just found myself in the kitchen, just walking in circles. I'm like, man, where's my number? What do I have to do? Who do I have to call? What's happening? And so kind of getting through that little bit of disorientation. Now that it's been about a month, I'm starting to kind of hone in on, what are the types of things I like to do? Is it, I enjoy the leadership aspect of what I've been doing. How do I want to display that for the next phase of my career, whatever that looks like. So having some fun, getting some things done around the house. And we'll actually talk about this in a minute when we talk about some AI stuff. But I found my notes from the first AI in Sales conference, which was, I think, 7 years ago, hosted by what was at the time the American Association of Inside Sales Professionals. So I'll dig in a little bit about what people thought back then versus today.
Well, that's great. Thank you, Rob. It sounds like you need to, get yourself a dog or you're.
I have a dog that I'm willing to sell.
There you go. Oh, no.
I did not spend this much time with that dog. And I'm like, hey, dog daycare is good for you. No, yeah.
It's funny how that changes when you're spending all day, every day with them.
Yeah, exactly. I have definitely enjoyed my rideshare on demand free job for my 2 children. So that's been a lot of fun.
There you go. Fun stuff. I know you're a sports guy in Michigan. Are you following the Tigers now?
Yeah, they actually won a game yesterday. We're recording this on October 1st. So as of this moment, still alive in the playoffs. Excited to see what they can do. But, by the time if they get to another game, I think pitching may be either me, you, somebody from the audience here, because it's been a little bit challenging. My other team, lifelong Red Sox fan as well, which is, I know, a weird dichotomy, but whatever. Wow. And so both of those teams being in the playoffs is kind of exciting. We'll see what happens.
Could be an interesting clash at some point.
Yeah, that would be amazing to me.
Yeah. Well, cool. I could talk sports all day. So before we go down that rabbit hole, we'll transition back into AI here. And you mentioned you have that you went to that conference 7 years ago and everything. So lots of stuff for us to jump into. But as you know, I like to have all of our guests finish the prompt I think AI is. So if you could set that foundation for us, that would be great.
Yeah. I think AI is a challenge. I think it's a challenge in a couple of different ways. for people like myself that have worked a certain way for a certain length of time, it's very disruptive. It can be a value add, but at times chasing your tail on how do you utilize it, I think can send you down rabbit holes that just don't effectively use it. I think it's a challenge to how businesses function. I think it's a challenge to determine what is AI and what does it mean to certain aspects of sales, of marketing, of just how do people work on a day-to-day basis. It can in a lot of ways outthink a person, but at the same time, how does the challenge of losing what people fear, which is the human connection side of it too. So
Sure.
when you threw me that prompt, I gave it a lot of thought, and like I said, I think the word to me is challenge.
I like that. I like that. You know, and challenge has an emotional response.
Exactly.
It can make you nervous and anxious, and it can make you excited. So I'm curious how you approach challenges and change. You know, what is your mindset, and how do you kind of make sure that you're not just doing things for the sake of doing it, and that it's actually
Right.
the appropriate thing for you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like I said, I mean, in this career, I've had multiples of different types of things that have come along that have been quote unquote the game changer, right? Like there was a time where this concept of social selling, where you connect with people on LinkedIn and utilize Facebook and all the different types of tools there. And so I've seen different, even going back to using email for the first time. I remember when people were nervous about that. And then we went to a spot where I think people over indexed on the digital communication and lost the ability to just pick up the phone and call. And so for me, I actually think, a habit of study is important, like actually making time to look at what something might do and how it would impact what you do, what your team does, however something might directly impact you, and then also your customer base, right? Or your prospect base. Back to that social selling phase that we went through. I actually put an hour on my calendar at one point. I just called the social hour. And that hour was I had dedicated time to go out, do research on tools, process, thought leadership, whatever it might be. And I really have kept that. I still call it the social hour, but
Love that.
it transitioned to, all right, now I'm going to do AI. And the other thing it did for me was protect some time where if I had a vendor that reached out to me and said, hey, I've got this new tool, I want to show it to you. I always knew I had an hour that I could put aside for that because oftentimes, while I wasn't in the market to buy something, inspiration comes from what other people are doing with something.
100%. Do you have an example, something that kind of like, something that happened, maybe it's even years ago from
Yeah.
that hour that is still holds true today, or you still
Yeah.
have like in your day to day? I'm
Yeah.
curious if there's like a big aha moment you love to share.
Well, there was one, so it was a specific sales tool that I've used multiple times now into great effect, and I'll name them. It's something called Consensus, which is a video display tool. It does short demos, like recorded on-demand demos, and so you can take your product. And in having been in software sales now for the better part of the last 20 years, the ability to demonstrate your stuff to somebody. And so anyway, I had talked to them at a conference. They had a lot of interesting ideas, took a demo. It took about 3 years before I got the organization to actually do it, but it inspired me into how do you leverage an interactive piece early on in your sales process that would enable a salesperson to know what somebody might be interested in. Because at the end of the day, in sales, I think the greatest challenge, it seems to be a word I use a lot, but one of the greatest things you have to overcome, and since in this one is a challenge to overcome, is that people are typically already doing something that you're trying to disrupt. So most times you're in a disruptive position. People don't wake up in the morning and say, you know what I need to do? I need to disrupt myself today and have a very difficult time transitioning to something new. And so I looked at ways, and I've always tried to find ways to get people inspired, get them thinking, because if I can just engage them for a minute, I want to have a process by which I could do that. And like I said, Consensus was one of those tools, ongoing and multiple phone calls today, generating content that's engaging and thought provoking. Again, often using a GPT tool to check myself on what I think would work.
Sure.
That to me has been and continues to be sort of one of those things that started with one thing and has sort of become a process by which you approach your market from there.
That's great stuff. I want to dive in a little bit to that process a little bit more, and more from the aspect of the sales guy, right? So
Yeah.
you're going into a sales pitch or a discovery call or whatever it may be, and I think that this is such an important thing to talk about. And maybe it's just me being in my own little window here as an entrepreneur. I'm a lifelong marketer. Sales is something that I've had to learn to help to grow my business. And I think that as soon as you call something sales, like this anxiety comes in,
Totally.
for someone like again, I'm not experienced with it. So I'm curious as to what lesson you can impart on me or any people that are in my position as to how you process things out. Because I think when you have that, you don't want to be rigid, right? You got to be able to adapt and everything, but how you process things and into your sales pitch and your follow-up. You mentioned took 3 years to get your organization to adapt something, and there are long sales cycles, right? Whether it's internally or externally. So I'm curious
Right.
how you approach that to make sure that you are being maximally effective from a sales perspective.
Yeah. And I think, we could probably do a series of
Sure.
podcasts on, what is sales, but
Dial it down into one sentence now.
yeah, exactly. I'll do that right now.
Yeah.
I think sales is helping people change. It's helping people transform, right? Typically, when people think of the sales process, it's, the vision you immediately get is the used car, hey buddy, like I got a deal for you today type of thing. And I don't really look at that as quote unquote real sales. That's just a transactional piece. Really helping somebody change is what sales is about. Like if you think of it instead of I'm trying to sell somebody something, and it's more like I'm helping them evolve and change into something greater, that to me gives you a little bit more oomph for the passion that you might have for it, and again, in a sales process, if you find yourself talking about you and what you do all the time, that's probably not what you're trying to accomplish. What you're trying to accomplish is helping somebody see how I actually help them, right? Like that's sort of the goal at the end of the day. And I'm sure you as an entrepreneur, you're not like, hey, I'm just here to get some money from you. I'm actually here to help you change and evolve this process. Do something better today than you were doing yesterday. And that to me, if you can take that approach and engage people in that way, I think you have a much better chance of getting the outcome which you want, which is a sale, but really getting the outcome that you want for them, which is an evolution or a change.
I have a really hard time believing people don't want to just sit here and listen to me talk about myself for an hour. Rob. Come on now.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
There was a guy that once, you pick up these things over the years, and I was at a conference, and this guy was talking about the slide deck, and he was calling them wee slides, and that made me giggle. I'm like, wee
Sure.
slides, and he's like, yeah, all the slides are about us, and all we're doing is weeing all over ourselves and our opportunity to sell. And I was like, that's genius, man.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And that's always stuck with me. When I look at a slide deck that somebody has, a pitch deck, I'm like, when the first 6 slides are about you and setting up you, I'm like, dude, I'm trying to, if you're doing that, you're trying to create a transactional relationship. And that's not what you really want. I want trust. Like a conversation to me is far more valuable than is me talking. Like you said, you have a hard time believing that, as a joke, that people just want to hear you talk about yourself. Nobody wants that, I always say, like, if you met somebody for the first time and they spent the first half hour talking about themselves, you'd be like, I do not ever want to see this person again.
You can see their eyes just glaze over.
Oh, it's miserable.
You can see that moment of them just like falling asleep or they're typing on the side or something like that. Absolutely. Cool. So there's another question I wanted to jump in just in terms of your experience. And this is kind of a 3-pronged question, but it's the same question. You obviously are a sales leader. You have managed teams, you have built teams. So I'm curious from your perspective, what does a high-performing sales leader look like? What does a high-performing sales team look like? And what does a high-performing sales or SDR look like?
Yeah.
So kind of 3 different roles or components of roles in organizations. How do you delineate that? And what is success to you?
Yeah. So great question. I would say I will start with the sales leadership because I think that high performing sales leader casts a shadow organization that is um, serves the other two greatly, right? So
Sure.
I believe that a great sales leader has a servant leader mentality, and that's an easy thing to say, and people say it all the time, but it's really important. But when you look at an organization, how do you serve the organization and the team? I'm a big believer in establishing culture, in establishing a cadence of how do you work with people, as in like how do I show up day to day on what do we do. And I find that when you do that, you provide structure, you provide that game plan, that playbook that people can actually operate in, either as an individual contributor or as, my last couple of jobs as a leader of leaders, trying to grow and develop the best possible managers that I could. And I actually have a great sense of pride right now in that the month after, since I've left ModMed, the team had a really great month without me. And I'm like, that's
Awesome.
awesome. That makes me
Yeah.
so happy because it tells me that those people that I helped grow and teach and give a process to were able to function and do those things day in without somebody having to make them do that. And so, there's a couple of things within that I think are super important. Like I said, just developing that culture. I also say people get a lot further with a good idea in a t-shirt than they do with just a good idea. And so helping people change that rhythm of communication, like just however you do it. And in the remote world, that's two-dimensional conversations, three-dimensional when you can, Slack messages, emails, whatever it is, just that constant communication. One of the things that I found myself doing in this transition, and I spent, majority of that 15 years at Thompson was in an office with a large team standing in front of me or sitting in front of me. And so we could have a meeting where there's 150 people standing up at their desks and we're just talking, right? And at ModMed, it was always a remote situation for myself. And so, yeah, we would do some things in the headquarters in person, but other things were done remotely. And when you're face to face, you can just walk over to somebody's desk and be like, "Hey, how you doing today? What's going on?" And when you're remote, that genuine human caring, you still have to have. And so I would try very hard to a couple times a week just ring out to somebody on Slack who's not expecting me to say anything to them, just be like, "Hey, noticed you had a good week this week. What was going on? What happened?" And so giving people that chance to share, or if I saw somebody was struggling a little bit, like, "Hey, hey John, I see you're struggling right now. What are you thinking, man? Let's get on a call. Let's talk about it." And so being proactive, I think, is one of the most important things a sales leader can do. So, what does a high performing sales person look like, right? That was the second thing that you asked.
Yeah. Team
Um,
or SDR. You can
yeah,
go.
team. Yeah. And I think they're very similar. Um, I think they, how do I say this? The people focus so much today on metrics, right? They look at just how many phone calls did you make? How many emails did you send? Like this concept of if I do things enough times, something good will happen is somewhat true. Like I do believe that there is a foundational effort piece that has to happen. But to me, that high performing person is putting, um, ahead of the outcomes, they're putting a process. And so something that they can repeat, something that is part of how they function, part of their DNA, I think is super important, especially for SDRs. For SDRs, you've got to have hey, I'm, there's the old, how do you make it to Antarctica? Do you go 20 miles a day or do you go 40 miles when it's nice and 5 miles when it's bad? And I'm always like 20 miles a day is what you always want to do. Like, regardless of what you do, go do this. And so I think setting yourself up to be that kind of person is important. You've got to be thoughtful. Again, back to what I was just saying a few minutes ago, can't be about me. It's got to be about you. I have to be thinking in terms of that. I would encourage my team very strongly to, hey, go just prompt metrics that matter to my prospect. What does success look like for my prospect? And in today's world, AI will feed you back some really good answers and insights into, in the case of a doctor's practice, a metric that matters is patient visits. Cool. Don't talk about how you make a patient visit happen more frequently. Talk about what does that patient visit look like to that person, and then transition into, hey, what if you could do that more frequently, right? And so there are some just foundational sales skills that I think still matter, and so those are things that I think look super important. And then as an organization, everybody understanding what they're supposed to be doing in that organization, feeling appreciated for it, but also knowing what it is. Like, what's my role? We used to talk about, playing your position. And I think that's really important, but also a high performing person takes extreme ownership. It's a book by Jocko Willink. A lot of people have read it, but they take responsibility for the fact that, hey, whatever happens in my world is me. If I'm a sales rep and I don't have enough leads, that's my fault. It's not the SDR. It's not marketing. It's not my manager. It's me. What am I going to do about it? What's my plan to affect it? It might be meeting with those people and trying to get them to do more.
Sure.
But at the end of the day, I'm the person responsible for it. If I'm an SDR and I'm not booking enough meetings, that's on me. Is it my messaging? I got to do something different. And you can do that if you have a process and a system by which you approach. It's much easier to nuance and change up your game than it is from just like, well, I don't know what I'm going to do today. So let's just, I guess I'm going to call some people, And I think back to, I had a new sales rep. This is a long time ago. I had a new sales rep, and we had a position. Our sales team at the time was effort. Your territory was created by your own effort, right? So like if I called somebody every 30 days, they were mine to work, and I would continue to prospect them. And if they took some action online, I'd get that lead, but I had to be in touch with these people every 30 days. And I just remember this one rep. I'm like, hey, so what's your plan today? She says, well, I'm out of people to call. So I'm just looking up people named with my name, and I'm calling because I think that would be fun. And I'm like, something's broken here. Like I am not providing that person the right playbook and process for how to be successful, or I'm letting it just go too much, right? Like I'm not doing enough to get into it. And that person ended up being a very successful sales rep. She was super young at the time. It just but that's one of those things you just remember of, all right, like how do you fit into that process? So anyway, pretty long-winded answer, but you can see it's a lot about culture. It's a lot about process. It's a lot about, that playbook idea of, all right, if I know what I want you to do within the framework of that, you can go and do it. And, as you said, I'm a sports guy. One of the things I always enjoyed reading was books by coaches, because I found that the coaching of salespeople and the coaching of a football team or a baseball team or whatever was often very similar. I have somebody I'm trying to put into a game where the goal of the game is to win, aka hit your bookings number. And I hate the San Francisco 49ers. Like I grew up as a Cowboys fan. In the 80s, I transitioned to the Lions because the Lions actually started being on TV and I could watch them.
Nice.
And Bill Walsh was a longtime, very successful coach of the 49ers. And he wrote a great book called The Score Takes Care of Itself. And the concept of that is, hey, look, if you do the detail things and you do the process things correctly, at the end of the day, you'll get the outcome that you want. And I've always very much subscribed to that philosophy.
I couldn't agree more, and thank you. There's so many good, tidbits there. A lot of great things to consider. But I agree. I'm a sports guy too, like we talked about, and there's just so many, ways that it can translate into business. And actually, on a previous episode, I had said I would love to have a week just in the Eagles locker room and just hear the way that they talk about things, the words that they use, the process they have. I mean, that's how an organization should be run, and
Totally.
Again, you're taking care of the little things and the details. To Coach Walsh's point, the score is going to be handled. So
yeah, I mean, I will always say I've been blessed with a lot of really great leaders in my day and a lot of people I would consider mentors. But the best one I ever had is a guy named Clint Alexander. He's a head football coach of a very high-performing high school football team, been a really great friend of mine for a long time. But when it came to leadership development and how do you lead people, my conversations with him had as much or more value than conversations with executive coaches and sales VPs and all of this stuff, because the mindset that was needed to win those games and get young people to perform isn't truly that different. And when you're talking, especially in sales, about teams like SDR teams, the difference in age between an 18-year-old and a 22-year-old SDR isn't that different.
Yeah.
And so gaining that that insight and that knowledge. So I always tell people, when you seek mentors and coaches, seek them in different places than necessarily your industry. If you're developing as a sales leader, cool. Find somebody that leads people in a different area, because you may be inspired by something they're doing, and it gets you away from that homogeneous look at like numbers management and that kind of thing.
That's great advice. I mean, it's so easy to just kind of stay in your little lane and just iterate from that, where a completely different new perspective might have a much larger change for you, or performance impact for you. So I want to jump back into culture a little bit here and kind of tie this into AI. I think culture is so important. I have worked at 5 different agencies prior to starting Action Hero and Left Brain, and I have very clear kind of like flashbacks of culture, for each one of them, and how like I felt each day working for them. And so I think one of the biggest things is putting in that culture of being able to, like you said, be genuine and work with each other and kind of grow and know your role. But I think an important aspect is the availability or the permission to fail.
Absolutely.
And like that's one of the best ways to learn, is to just screw up, right? And so I'm curious how you build that into your culture and allow people to try new things like AI, because it's and how to, like, AI can be something that you overuse, like we talked about, or you can over rely on it and stuff like that, but you have to almost fail to figure that out sometimes. So I'm curious how you implement that and think about that.
Yeah. So I think the people that have worked under my organizations before would say one of the things that they liked about me was I empowered them to make their own decisions. Because I'm a big believer, if I tell you to do something, you have to overcome me telling you first to then go and do it. And you're trying to meet my way because you think there's some agenda that I have in doing that.
Right.
If it's your idea first, it's going to be a lot easier for you to implement. And I think one of the secrets of great leadership is to have an idea and give it to somebody else, and it becomes their idea. So when people are doing that, I do think that sit down, that conversation of, hey, what's something new you're trying? And when they are, check in with them. Okay, what's working, what's not? Like, if it's something that you think is high risk, check in frequently. If you think it's low risk, take the time that you need. But also, as they're setting it up, I think one of the things you want to do is just have that conversation of, hey, look, I'm going to start trying AI on this. Cool. How will you know that it's been successful for you? Right? Like, get them to think about that. Like, you think about when you interview for jobs, one of the questions people, I think is a good question to ask is, hey, in 6 months, if I'm in this role, what's success look like to you?
I love that question.
Exactly. Right. And so I like to reverse it when I'm interviewing people. So it's just one of those things of, hey, give me a future state of, how do you know that this actually worked? Because I have seen people run down rabbit holes and be like, oh, this is great. I'm doing all this stuff. And 2 days in, they had one success, and suddenly it's the greatest idea in the world and everybody's doing it. And then suddenly it turned out it was just lucky. Right. Yeah. And so you want to give people the space, but you could give them the parameters of thinking about what is a positive outcome going to look like, then I think it can happen. And I also think people change better with small change than they do with large change. If you come in and you're like, hey, there's 27 things that you need to do, they're not going to do any of them. If you can give somebody one thing to do, that's great. There's another little piece of sort of the things that I think are important. Back to the culture piece. I once, a long time ago, took it was spin selling through Huthwaite's workshop, teaching us how to do spin selling. But then the second piece was spin coaching. And spin is it's a book from 1988. It's probably one of the seminal works on how do you ask questions in the sales process, right? Sure. Like, spin today has such a negative word that I'm always like, hey, hold on. This is not like spin bad. This is like situation, problem, implication, needs, payoff. It's the type of questions. Anyway, one of the things that they talked about there is as when you're training somebody a skill, you should do role play. Like, role play is always super important. But the problem with role play is at the end, oftentimes you'll be like, okay, here's 9 things that you should do better. and that never works. And so at the end of anything like that, and I try to use this in one-on-ones, I try to use it in coaching. I just try to ask this question of, okay, Kyle, you just did this thing. What's one thing you thought you did well? Or what do you think is one thing that will happen that's good from what you're about to try? Cool. What's one thing that you're worried about? Or what's one thing you could do better? Awesome. Do that one thing, right? Like, not me giving you a bunch of things.
Yep.
Most humans recognize when they did something not to perfection or have an idea of what they think a good outcome would be.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm always like, let them start with that. That's how you empower people to have that sort of change mindset. And so back to AI, that was one of the things that, we were starting to use. And I had a couple people on my team who were leaders who were very much into the idea and very much into how do I utilize it. And what they discovered was it took time to teach the prompts to get outcomes that made sense. And so that was the keyest learning of their first foray into AI was, I can't just put something in here and expect it to be perfect. I need to teach the machine. And when I do, now the machine gives me a much better output. It's something I can utilize more and faster. And so that change management piece, I think, made them significantly better at leveraging a GPT to be able to get the outcomes that they actually wanted. And if they hadn't thought in those terms, I think they would have given up. They would have probably in the first one been like, this isn't doing any good for me. Screw this. Let's move on to something else.
Sure. Smart man, Rob. That's what I tell every single person that I talk to that wants to, start dabbling into AI. I say, ChatGPT or, Gemini or, whatever your tool of choice is a great way to start figuring it out. Learn how to prompt. You have to,
right.
You can't, this is not a Google search. You need to instruct it and tell it what your outcome is, what its role is, that kind of stuff. So that's such a smart way to be thinking about it. And yeah.
Well, it was funny. I have a couple of teenagers, and my little son wanted to do a sleepover at his friend's house, and they were trying to figure out how to sell the mom on a sleepover. And they put it into ChatGPT, and it didn't work. And so my son was like, this thing doesn't know what it's doing. And I'm like, dude, try, you got to teach it to be like, okay, how do I convince a mom to have a sleepover when it's, last minute, and it was funny to watch him because his prompts have gotten better. And I know now when he's trying to get something from me, when he's actually gone through and GPT'd it to try it out. But that's when
it has the long dash. So it came
exactly.
Right.
I'm right. Like, yeah, I'm like, why do you need to spend another $100 on Clash Royale? Like, you bought everything? So it's, but that also tells you that stuff's here to stay, right? When you have, if you're a leader today or have aspirations of becoming a leader, well, you better understand this because that next generation that's coming into the workforce over the next 10 years, they grew up with it. And so they're going to be familiar. They're going to expect to be able to use that tool. And they're also going to have a very different human experience than what you might have had. I mean, like I said, my first job was delivering newspapers. Can you imagine today if you walked out into your neighborhood and there was somebody walking along the street with a bag over their shoulders handing out newspapers? You would think that person's lost their mind. Yeah. But that was literally a job that I had to do every day, rain, shine, snow.
You throw something on my lawn, you're probably getting the cops called on you.
Exactly right. Yeah, exactly right. Like I'm super suspicious. I used to have to go knock on people's door and be like, "Hey, I need to collect," and they're like, "Didn't we already pay you?" I'm like, "Maybe, I don't know. I didn't keep good records, so pay."
Oh my God, amazing.
Yeah.
So I think there's an interesting tie-in here. We've talked a lot about culture and relationships and the human to human. I am forever going to be using wee slides now. So I'm wondering how you make sure that AI doesn't take away that human connection. Right? Because again, like it is so easy to just start talking about you or why my product is the greatest or, how I'm going to do XYZ for you and things like that. So, AI is great. The term I love to use is human empowerment. It empowers you to do more for less. But, you don't want to lose that connection. So how are you, is it as simple as just using the right prompts, like you said, and maybe using it for deeper research, or is there more complicated ways that you're kind of using it in your day to day?
Yeah. I don't know. I think for me, that's sort of the next phase of understanding it, right? Like, I think I have some ideas. I wouldn't say I've put them into practice, but definitely one to me is if you're about to make an important sales call, one of the things we used to do is sit down and scope out and plan this whole sales call, right? Like that was, before you picked up the phone and got somebody on there, what did you want to talk about? What were outcomes? I think using chat or, GPT type tools to, um, you know, plan a sales call. What are some good questions I can ask a doctor or a pharmacist or a CPA or whatever I'm selling to around this aspect of their business? And starting to get that back, but then being the person to actually call and ask those questions. Like, I just think the fear I have is that with tools like this, people become more and more digital. And I actually think it needs to be just an enhancement to what you do versus taking away from what you do. And so, for my advice to people is use it, but, pick up the phone and call somebody.
That is, again, as a non-sales guy, that is something that I am really trying to force myself to do. I'm not a phone guy. I love my tech. I love my tools.
Right.
But with being an entrepreneur and with being in AI, I've really, and even just this podcast, I've noticed how much I enjoy just having this face-to-face with you and having a conversation, and just how much more impactful it is, and how business is just better when it's not a machine doing something or sending you a message or something like that. So,
right. Well, especially if whatever you're selling is potentially a big change for somebody. Again, human beings prefer not to change. Like, that's just in our nature. And so having that trust factor is always really important. I've had multiple sales from my teams over the years where the first person talking to them didn't provide that stability and confidence that got somebody to say, yeah, we can do this. And then a new voice came in and be like, what are you so worried about? I've had 5 people do this and this is how they've done it. And people are like, oh, that's all I needed to hear. I'm good to go. And so sometimes that piece of just, hey, look, it causes some sweaty pits. Like, it can make you nervous. It can get you going. But, I think you find that once you're actually talking to people, people are people, and you'll find that you have that capability to just get it done.
Well, whether you're selling a product or a service, in a way, in some fashion, you're selling yourself too. To
Absolutely.
a point, there has to be that trust. So if someone is going to open up their wallet and ask for marketing services, they need to trust me as that person that's going to do that, as well as trust the organization, as well as trust the process and trust the service and all that stuff. But they want to know that there's a person here that can speak to them. If something goes wrong, they can call me and things like that. So the relationship is still extremely important, for sure. Amazing. So we have about 10 minutes left here, Rob. So I want to kind of jump into a couple things. And I know this is always such a tough question. So I'm sorry if I'm putting you on the spot here, but I'm curious as to how you see sales evolving as AI evolves. The speed and the acceleration of business and change is unfathomable at this point with these tools.
Correct.
So I'm curious as to how you kind of see things changing, with AI and with all these tools, from a sales or even a general business perspective.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. And it is a challenging question. It's a hard question because what you think it's going to be is not always what it will be. And I'll referenced earlier that I went to this AI and sales conference 7 years ago. And I look back at those notes. What was fascinating was what people were talking about then was how AI was going to do things like allow you to scrape the internet to figure out somebody's personality and buying persona. And I was like, oh, okay. I mean, at the time, I'm like, oh, that sounds kind of cool.
Yeah.
But now it does it, and it gives you the questions and things that you should ask too. And people had sort of talked about that. But the other big one was AI is going to make you far more productive as a salesperson. Like, it's going to automate some of the tasks that you had to complete. and it's going to do that. And I don't really look at that necessarily as AI. I just look at that as, faster processing speed, right? Um, so some of those things have come true, and I think, but they've come true in different ways than what I think people believed they would be back then. So one of the back in, 2019, I gave a presentation on what I called the 2025 sales rep. And it was like, what are the different things that people in that position in what is now this year, what are some of the things they're going to have to be? And one of them was, I was like, man, I'm visionary. One of them was AI savvy. But and another one I had was a team player. You had to be like in a wolf pack, the leader of the pack, but you needed a pack of wolves to help you hunt.
Sure.
And I didn't really think about AI should really be considered a member of that pack. Like that to me is one of the evolutions that has to happen. If you have, if you're in a position where you have an SDR, a solutions engineer, some other supporting elements, you got to list AI amongst those. Like figure out how is that one of the team members that helps you. So I think that's a big evolution of how does it become your sidecar, co-pilot, whatever you want to look at it for. Like how does it help you with the communication and making things happen? I think because of that, there's a belief that it's going to do things like accelerate sales processes, but I actually think it's going to in some ways slow them down because buyers will become more familiar with the tools and they will leverage the tools to ask better and deeper questions. And as the thought engine behind these things evolves, whether I'm putting the prompts in or not, if 10 people before me had prompted something around asking these questions, now I prompt it, I'm already getting a better response than what the first person got. And so is that, it used to be this buyer sophistication from research. You're now going to have buyer sophistication from AI as people become more and more comfortable utilizing it. I don't know how many buyers are doing it yet, but it's going to happen. And as it does, you're going to have to evolve and continue to look at how do you message, what do you talk about, what is your true value proposition? I do remember I mentioned I took that spin selling. I learned it, was excited about it, went into a meeting with somebody at AAA of Michigan. It was a buyer, a professional buyer, and I'm like, hey, what about this? What about this? He goes, oh, you're using spin selling. I just took a course. Tell me, like, let's go. And it just made me realize that he was being trained in a way to match what I was being trained in to do. And I think that same thing will now happen within the machine. And so that is going to be, one of those challenges that as it becomes more prevalent, how are you able to communicate your message in a way that reacts to what the machine may say?
Interesting. Yeah, it's an interesting concept thinking about. I mean, obviously AI is involved in all of our lives, and there's always talk about humanoids and stuff like that. But it's an interesting way to frame it as in like it is a member of the team and is going to be supporting us, all of us. And how can we be more sophisticated while also answering the buyer's questions and things like that. It's very interesting. Cool. So my last general question around that is, I know you're transitioning, you're looking for a new role. When you find that opportunity and you jump in, what is the first thing that you're doing?
First thing I'm doing is the first thing I always do. Heads down, mouth shut, learning everything I can about the organization for the first 90 days or 30 days or whatever the time frame looks like. Like, I think that is always really important. But one of the things that will be part of that assessment is how are they leveraging AI, if at all, and what are the tools, what are the processes? So all those things I talked about that I think are important, in my head, I'm going to score an organization against those things. Like culture, scale of 1 to 10. How important is it? What does it look like? Can you actually establish, like, does somebody know what it is? Tools such as AI, scale of 1 to 10. How are they using them? What are they not? So I'm going to try to assess all of that and then say, okay, where from there then? What's in place today that we can leverage quickly? What needs a major change? what needs a major change but needs time to actually come into play, And so I've learned a lot of lessons over the years of trying to move some things too fast, like just coming in and being like, all right. And it's difficult because when you have a lot of experience, it often is very easy to see what the problem is. But back to my point earlier of, if I tell you what the problem is and you don't agree, you're not going to change in the way that eventually I need you to change. And sometimes that takes time and it takes iterations, and sometimes just needs a full reset of, people, again, over time. Like, you always want to give people a chance. You want people to have the opportunity to be successful.
Yep.
And so that's how I approach, that first month, first 90 days, whatever that time frame looks like. It's you do some consulting, and I think that's sort of how you do it. I'm honored and privileged to be married to an amazing woman who is a executive coach. And one of the things that I listen to her calls when she does them is the way she asks questions and tries to find out from people what their real problems are, even though within like 2 minutes, she's like, I can clearly see that this person has this issue, and this issue. Until they self-discover it or can bring it to light, you can't really affect positive change. And so, I try to emulate that.
That's great. It makes me think of one of my dad's famous sayings. He would impart to my brother and I growing up is, you were given 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason.
Exactly. Right. Exactly.
So it's like, ask the question and listen, let them get to it, learn from it and everything. So that's great. That's great.
Hey, and the good news now, though, you have 2 brains. You got your own and the one in the computer that you can leverage too. So.
Exactly. Well, cool. We've reached the rapid fire section here, Rob. I got 5 real quick hit questions for you. So, for your next venture, if you could pick any one company that you wanted to work for, what would it be, or organization, or whatever it may be?
Ooh, man, that's a tough one. That's been something I've been thinking a lot about. I don't really know. I want to go to a place that has opportunity for change, maybe building something new, or has been challenged that we have somewhat of a foundation to build from. But whatever it is, I'm excited to just have something that gets that passion going every day when you show up and you're like, hey, let's go make this happen today.
Passion and energy, got to have it.
Yep.
What is the most overhyped sales trend currently?
Ooh. In some ways it's, the most overhyped sales trend is, I actually think what people look at is digital engagement from people. I think people mistake traffic on the internet for engagement today. Mm-hmm. And so as people try to build engagement scores, I think they lie to themselves about that. And it really is, I looked at everything, and I always try to look at everything as a clue, not a, defined piece of what's happening. And so I feel like as people look at that digital traffic, not looking at it and going, oh man, they've done 5 things with us, they must be really interested. Man, that could just be they happen to go through a website. And so You've got to dig in and ask 4 questions. There's that, to me, is sort of, I think, something that's pretty overhyped.
There's always assumptions that need to be made, and
exactly,
assumptions can help, but they can be dangerous at the same time.
Correct.
What is the most memorable or your favorite pitch of your career?
I think back to the first time that I found myself asking problem questions and not just talking about myself. Like the first time I really did that, and that resonating with the prospect to a point where suddenly I wasn't talking as much. Like, I grew up at a time where I thought sales, somebody told me I should get into sales because I can talk.
Yeah.
And like you said, the 2 ears, 1 mouth. Once I learned that listening piece, so I very distinctly remember that first really good sale where somebody was like, yeah, man, I've got this problem, this problem, this problem. And I'm like, man, if you could fix those problems, what would that allow you to do? And they're like, this, and this. And I'm like, cool. Well, I have a way that we could do that. Do you want to talk about it? And they're like, yeah, it helped me. And so suddenly when they're parroting back to me the things that we do to help them, I knew I had them. It was a great feeling.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's nice having that kind of aha moment.
Yeah.
You truly feel it. What is your favorite sports moment of your life?
So, as I said, I'm a lifelong Red Sox fan. Um, I was at the 2004 World Series when they beat the Cardinals to win the World Series for the first time in forever. That was a big one.
The clinching game?
I was at Game 4 in St. Louis, which
Incredible.
was a whole series of weird things to get me there, but that was pretty cool. So that's a big one. Personally, my high school football team won the state championship. That was a big one. My college football team beat our rivals for the first time in 20 years to take home our little trophy, which nobody thought we would ever do again, which was pretty exciting. This was a long time ago. And then I got two kids who are in sports right now, and a lot of my favorite moments are actually coming from watching them do stuff. It's amazing to see.
I believe that. What position were you in football?
I was an offensive lineman primarily. Okay. I played a little defensive line, went a little, you played both ways, but I was a short tackle. Nice. Today's world, I don't even know if today's world, like my friends and I went to a Division III school, Kalamazoo College, and not known as a football powerhouse, but my friends and I, who I still talk to all the time, we'd look at the team today and we're like, our best athlete would be today's worst athlete on that team. Like any player from the team today would have been by far the best player on our team. It's just such a different evolution of how people approach sports than they did back in the late 80s.
100%. The tech, the science, everything. It's
amazing. Yeah.
All right, last one. What is the worst fashion trend you adopted in your life?
I had several pairs of Zubaz pants, so I don't know. That one was pretty rough. I also had a phase of cut off football pants that we would wear as shorts, which as an offensive lineman may not have been a very, very good look. I'm always like, man, why was I single so much in college? I got a pretty good idea that maybe there was something to do with that fashion trend.
Not the most flattering outfit.
No.
Incredible. Well, Rob, we've just reached the open forum kind of portion here. Is there anything that's important to you or that you're passionate about that maybe we didn't get to discuss that you want to share with everybody?
No, I mean, I think, the one thing, and I probably said it in some ways, but, I always do try to tell people, hey, take things you're trying to learn and do seriously. Like approach it like it's like you might have in school. Like so if you're going to embark on, how do I utilize AI? What are some things I can do to try to drive, myself forward or whatever? Take the time, be smart about it, seek out experts, read, like that kind of stuff. I have a lot of things people have said over the years that stuck with me. Wee slides, all those different types of things. But one of these motivational speakers I saw once at a conference was like, hey, peak performers take responsibility for their own learning. And I'm like, yeah, that is something that I think is super important. As somebody, I've been blessed by leading some great people on some great teams. I've won a couple of president's clubs, all of which I sold $0. The team sold all of it. And when I think about what made those teams successful, what made those people successful is that desire to just be better every day and take that responsibility for, making themselves better.
We talked about culture earlier and how I worked at a bunch of different agencies, and one that always stuck out, one of the values was take it personally.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, and that just it rings true. If
absolutely
it's your own money or it's your own job, whatever, and it is your own job, obviously. So that's the right way to approach it. So that's perfect. Well, Rob, thank you so much for joining today. Everybody can find Rob Beattie on LinkedIn. Is there anything else you want to plug? Anywhere else they can find you if they wanted to reach out or anything?
No, LinkedIn is by far the best place. Like if you're interested in connecting, happy to connect. If I can help somebody in any way, boy, I sure love to do that. So Kyle, I appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for imparting all of your sales experience and knowledge on us today. Thank you again for joining the Brainiac Blueprint. Rob, if you don't mind, just take a look at the camera and say, stay brilliant, Brainiacs.
Stay brilliant, Brainiacs.
Cheers. Thanks, Rob.
Thanks, Kyle.